want you to be prideful, but I no longer want you to cower. Sometimes we ingest certain things because of the way we've been taught and the way in which this country has been structured. And we start to think that somebody else is smarter than us. We start to think that, it's true. We believe the things that are said about us, but it's not true. And so sometimes you don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? And sometimes you think that somebody's better off because of the color of their skin. Somebody's more privileged, somebody got this, and you want to get in on that. You feel like, man, I got to get in with them because I ain't going to get it any other way. And that's a lie. You know what I mean? And like I said, you don't know what you don't know. If we were to look at this from a very fundamental standpoint, okay, level playing field, we're all one in Christ, okay? You know what I mean? uh People are people. People come with all different kinds of inadequacies. You know what I mean? People come with their own levels of ignorance and intelligence. You know what I mean? And sometimes that ranges. Not everybody's smart universally. You know what I mean? We know there's been the death of the common sense, but nonetheless, don't ever feel like somebody's better than you just because the way they show up and how they present themselves. And you have to realize a lot of times people use these leverages, especially as it relates to race, right? A lot of times that's just leverage that is then used to put that over your head to make you feel inferior. And you have to understand a lot of people are just doing what they know, but that's the only thing they know how to do, because of their own inadequacies, their own human inadequacies. They know they're not that great. You know what I mean? But it's like, man, how can I project that onto someone and make them feel some type of way? And you have to understand that that is white culture. White culture has used the act of inferiority and projection of inferiority to make you feel some type of way. Whereas other people may use things like, in the black community, black culture, it may be materialism. So I think that's why it's so important. I tell you guys to always study the cultures. You know what I mean? Understand that white culture is a culture in and of itself. Everybody is peculiar. They have their own culture. They have their own dynamics. They have their own ways of being and doing things. And a lot of times, if you're not aware of your culture, which is the majority, right? Because we know white supremacy really dejects any critique or critical analysis into white psychology. A lot of times you'll just do things based on what you know how to do. You know what I mean? It's like your default, so it's like, instead of being like, man, I'm feeling inadequate, I'm feeling whatever, it's like, let me go and make Janisha feel some type of way. Let me go and try to use some type of ploy to knock her off her square. You know what I mean? And so you have to look at it like that. And I think this will better help you moving into the new year. Learn how to engage with people and understand very quickly the difference in cultures. It's not the same. And it doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that there can't be friendships and there can't be love and there can't, what I mean? It doesn't mean there can't be respect. But it's like we understand that Hispanics, Japanese, Asian, everybody's culture is different. So there's no difference within white culture. So you have to understand it's a different culture. Okay. So let's just get that all squared away. And, as you move forward, understand that, hey, look, I'm going to be someone who, if I choose to engage in somebody's in their culture, I understand that there's a difference in cultures. I'm not going to lay down what I know to be true and, you know what I mean, just to fit in with someone else's culture because they may be unwilling to learn about my culture or may not have a desire to. And you have to understand that too. That's always the one thing that has always posed a big question to me. I'm not really sure why it is in America that, Black people are forced to integrate with other people's cultures and really give a lot of explanation for that. Whereas in other cultures, Asians have never had to sit online and talk about why they need to integrate with this or why they need to share that or why they need to, you know what I mean? That's never happened in any other culture. You know what I mean? I went to Chinatown up in Chicago. They've never had to sit and explain why X, Y, and Z, why they didn't want to, you know what I mean? Indians have never had to explain why they marry Indians. They've never had to explain that. So don't get caught up in that loop, to try to bring clarity to someone else who is ignorant and doesn't have an understanding of your culture. But you don't be ignorant in that either and give way to that. So let's go ahead and get into the podcast. I think the reason why so many people, especially as it relates to like conservatives and those who are progressive or may even say or may even identify with more liberal point of views, And it's kind of like the forcing of this sense of allegiance, right? And I think this is one thing. I broke it down. I found a sense of understanding as to why is it that when we talk about the Black experience, we talk about integration and in terms of like where we are today, integrating in these spaces, and in a lot of ways, a lot of people think of integration from a historical point of view, but we're very integrated today. Integration has been something that Black people have fought for, and it's very evident to see that those opportunities have definitely opened up the way today. Speaking of, I just had a thought about the 15% pledge, which is Aurora James' nonprofit where they help Black owned businesses. And she just talked about how they were seeking to stop the program. And it's these stories that typically go under the guise and under the radar because we're so busy. We see the designer brands, we see people like African Americans getting brand deals with Chanel, and we see the YSL, and we see the catwalk, and we see, you know what I mean? We see all these images of integration that we kind of forget and stop, and we don't really think about the plight, and we don't really pay attention to how, in a lot of ways, we're still fighting this battle to be seen. But I was just sitting here thinking to myself, and I was like, I realized that we were living in a time where a lot of people feel as though what Blackness is something you have to forego to integrate in white spaces, because a lot of people have a very monolithic view about Black people. That sounds like a general statement, but like really think about that. You know what I mean? Like really sit and like think about that. A lot of times people think of Black people in a very negative, stereotypical way. So it's like you feel like in order for a person to be successful, they need to let go of like Blackness and Black culture, and not really understanding that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I found that a lot of people, even if they're Black, I talk about y'all, not having no cousins, not being able to go kick it with your cousins on the weekend. Your mom might have moved you out in the burbs, but you still had cousins. You still had people you could share the world with, different points of views and experiences. And I just realized that we were just kind of like living in a space now where a lot of people, were coming up, and I realized a lot of people didn't have those experiences. I found that a lot of people who tend to lean more towards conservatives, like, conservatism, to the extent of, they really hold on to the belief, or at least subconsciously, I found, have some type of ideology that exists around the framework of Black people need to stop being so Black and ghetto and, all these different things to exist in white spaces. And so I think that's kind of why you have like the watering down, the dumbing down. You have a lot of Black people who feel as though they're forced or at least assaged into interracial relationships and things like that, because you start to adopt that same monolithic perspective of yourself. And it's called carried shame. It's called Black shame. It's called, you know what I mean? And Brene Brown actually wrote about this with, I think her name was Tanya. I gave the book away because I've finished it, and I gave it to my dad, but I can't think of her name. But it was with Brene Brown. And I use her name because we know Brene Brown has been really big with her work in vulnerability and her work in shame. And so I just thought that was really good. I think a lot of times people think that, because Black people are seen in this very negative light, and if you may have ingested some of that and you haven't found your sense of self to realize like no, to realize like no, Black people don't just exist in this vacuum, like we're all of it. And one thing I want to encourage you guys to take with you in the new year is get to a point in your life where you start to identify with Black excellence. I know a lot of people have been on the fence about that. I'm still for Black excellence because I believe in it. I think about the work that we've done, the things that we do. I mean, just I'm not talking about Kamala Harris, even though, shout out to Kamala. I'm not talking about Mrs. Harris. Okay. I'm talking about, Nina Simone, I'm talking about Miles Davis. I'm talking about this very rich culture that we come from. You know what I mean? Like we have Simone Biles in modern time. You know what I mean? Like there was a point in time where it was like, I just think that there was a point in time where it was like we were so far off in a distance and we were so disconnected from one another, and our excellence was something that was like it was prominent, but it was still like, you know what I mean? And I think now we kind of have that recognition. So I'm more so just encouraging you guys to find new levels, find new ways to identify with your Blackness that don't exist within the institutionalized learning projections, you know what I mean, of who you are, and that don't exist within the projections of America's identification of you. You know what I mean? Find the excellency that exists within our art, our culture, our cuisine. I mean, I think Black people will take anybody's food and just turn it all the way up. You know what I mean? Like, and I think if we could start to identify with the spirituality, start to identify with God, start to identify with, you know what I mean? Like, and I know that that's very touching and looks a lot differently for a lot of people, but I just think that there's something so beautiful about the Song of Solomon. You know what I mean? I think there's something beautiful about God's grace in our lives and how we don't really have to carry these burdens on our by ourselves, you know, especially as African Americans, because it's a very heavy experience. You know what I mean? It's a very heavy experience. And I do think that, you know, we've made so much progress. And I thank God so much for that. You know, like even as I was recording this podcast when I first started Renaissance Room, you know, there was a point in time where it was like, you know, Black people, I mean, white people were still wilding out in terms of like racism. You know what I mean? Now it's a little bit more concealed, and you know, it's a little bit more not so in your face, you know? And so I just think that we have made so much progress. You know, I think our fights and our voices matter. You know, we're no longer living in a space and time where it's like, you know, you get to jobs and you're having the experience that I used to have, you know, back in, you know, 2017, 2016, 2015, you know what I mean? Like all of that has kind of been addressed. And, you know, it's like you're really bold if you were to kind of like insult or you know try to you know make a Black person feel some type of way by using like your white privilege or your white supremacy or whatever the case may be, given the social hierarchy of the position. We're just in a different space, and so I definitely think that we have progressed, and I think that's something to really celebrate. And so I just want Black people to you know, seek to identify with your excellence, you know, seek to identify with those who came before you, you know what I mean? And you know, as Maya Angelou say, you know, stand is that walk into a room is one, but stand is 10,000. You know, I want you to think about the resiliency of your people. You know what I mean? I want you to carry yourself wow, like you're God's child. You know what I mean? I mean, to be a people who have been like completely assassinated, whose, you know, her culture has been robbed, has been, you know what I mean? Like we've been really, really down and out. And like you can look at other oppressed groups who try to identify with us. But again, the Black experience is so unique. These cultures have not been through what we've been through, and even still continuously, right? Like we know that reparations were paid to other cultures, but not to the Black person. So, you know, to just be where we are today, to just be so resilient, like you just got to know that God is with you. You know what I mean? And like He will never fail you. He will never forsake you. And it's like anything you want to do, you can put your mind to it and identify with your Blackness, identify with the Black excellence, identify with all the things, all the trials and the triumphs. I mean, think about your own life. You know what I mean? I think about when I first started out working, the experiences I was having, you know, them white girls like really clowning me because I had like long nails. And when I say clowning me, I'm not going to say clowning me. They was really being racist and like just crazy. You know what I mean? I've had so many experiences where it's like, you know, I've got fired from jobs just because of their own personal hatred towards me or whatever the case may be. I remember I had a white lady, you know, pressing me, asking me if I was pregnant. And, you know, it just was all these crazy things I've been through. And so it's just like to be where I am today, it's just nothing but the grace of God. I'm actually looking at a picture on my desk and it's a Jeremiah 29:11. So it's like, I want you guys to carry yourself with, you know, be proud of who you are. You know what I mean? I'm not saying be prideful, but I am saying be proud of who you are. Be proud of where you've come from. You know what I mean? I think about the excellence and just the opportunities. I see so many people doing great things. Y'all know I've been like, you know, writing on the NFL. So just seeing the guys out there working with their, you know, agility and their gifts and things like that. Like, it's just like, I just feel like where we are today, it's something to be so proud of. And, you know, you don't have to share that experience with anybody if you don't want to. I mean, that's your personal experience. You know what I mean? And so that's for you to digest. That's for you to ingest. You know what I mean? That's for you to, you know, really, really get a sense of glory out of that because we've come so far. And when you look at the African American history, I want you to look back and study, you know what I mean? The housing and study the things that we've went through, right? Redlining and so forth. And then I want you to look at Black home ownership. You know what I mean? I want you to just look from then and now and just really carry yourself with a sense of you just be very proud of where we are and just very much see the work of the work of God in our lives, in our culture, in our community. So I just wanted to come on and encourage you guys as we go into the new year. Keep your head up. You know what I mean? Keep your head up. Keep your head up. Keep your head up. And I'm just wishing you all the best. Peace.